Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here today to talk to you about the historic international racing track in Porto, also known as the Circuito da Boavista. I fall in love with this racing track. The history behind it is huge. We're talking about over 100 years of history of races in Porto and in the north of Aldoar, in the racing track of Boavista, in all of this area. So there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, I'm not going to cover all of it in this video. It would be very extensive. So today, I'm just going to go through some brief facts about the racing track. I'm going to show you straight away in the map of Upland where the racing track goes. And you can go also to our channel, Circuito da Boavista Racing Track channel on Discord on Upland Portugal, which you can see in the description of this video where that is if you're not there yet. And in there you'll have access to a high definition map where you can see the names of the streets where the racing track is going, so that you have the precise information where the properties are if you are interested in buying any property there, or to check if you have any property there and if you want to start helping us build the racing track. Obviously, the aim at the moment is to get 20% of the buildings built in the racing track, so we can apply to the Ultra Racing League in Upland and get the circuit approved in the end. Our aim is to complete this racing track and then to continue for the other racing tracks that have history in this not in this area. We would like to place this part of Porto in the map of Upland as a place where many races can take place, different cars, different categories. I think it will be very interesting and it's something that is real. Actually, this actually happened in the history in this area, and that's what we are here to do, and that's why I'm so excited about this, because this is not a racing track that someone from us, from our team, has developed. This is the history. This racing track you can see here above my head is actually a racing track that Formula One cars have raced. The first woman in history racing a Formula One racing track was in this racing track here. Italian lady, which I'll get into the details very soon. So for now, I'm just going to start now jumping into the racing track of Upland, where we can see here in Porto. If you're not familiar with it, you can see here where Aldoar is. So this is Aldoar Vintage, our nod that extends to this part of Nevogild. So if you look at the map in here, you can see that it matches this area here. So let's start with the start to finish, which is about in here in this area without houses, and then we've got the roundabout here close to the sea. Okay, so it runs from here, does all this Avenida Boavista, where some buildings are already being built and finished, some of them. This is the first part where we started. I've got my building here and my car, one of my buildings and my car, and these are all the people we have on Discord already helping us to build on a track. In here, in this intersection, it goes left into this avenue here, which I'll tell you the name, which is Avenida do Doutor Antunes Guimarães. And then it turns left again here in Rua do Lidador. Okay, it goes here, it goes up to the Estrada Interior da Circunvalação, so it goes this way, goes up around here, and now we are already coming closer to the end of it, still on the same road, and we get to this roundabout and we are at the end. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So this is where it starts, comes like this, up here, goes in there. It doesn't go here like in the node, in the neighborhood. It goes straight up. So that's why there's a few properties here that are inside our node that actually belong to Ramalde. But that's the way the node is, and that's the way the racing track is. So the racing track is in the node. So all the properties that are in the racing track are obviously in the node. Even the properties that are here south of Avenida Boavista, which are obviously in Nevogilde, they also belong to the racing tracks. All the first properties belong to the node. For example, this one wouldn't belong to the node, and these ones wouldn't belong, just the first ones that touch the street. Okay, so this is the information I can give you here about the node. We already have, as you could see here, many buildings being built, and we need help to continue to build more. So I've got another map in here which you can see clearly how it is. Okay, this is we have the racing track going through 3 different neighborhoods: Aldoar, Nevogilde, and Ramalde, just like I told you. So also these properties here on the right side of the racing track will be in the node, and these ones, they belong to Aldoar, but some of them in here in the south, they belong to Nevogilde, and in the future some of these properties here that belong to Matosinhos will also belong to the node. So only the properties who touch the racing track. Okay, it's a racing track with 7.35 kilometers, 4.57 miles. It's a long track, probably at the moment must be the longest in Upland. But as far as conversations have gone with other members in Upland, with other players, I've been told that it's long, but it's the first racing tracks. They were a mix of tests that Upland was doing. So being a long racing track doesn't scare us and doesn't scare anyone. Everybody's investing in it, and it's a beautiful project because it's a real one. It's coming from real life into Upland, and that's what we would like to bring. This is the racing track you will see in our Discord server, where if you zoom in, you'll have access to the names of the streets, and you can make sure you check that you are on the right place, so you can see if you own any property there. Okay, so this map will be available in our Discord server in the Circuito da Boavista channel. Okay, just to go there and have a look. Some stats about the racing track at the moment. The racing track in total has 328 properties, which we have built already in 1 month since we announced it, the node and the racing track. We have 10 built already, 12 are in progress, so that it comes to a total of 22 properties. We has node members. The total properties we have of the 328 are 134, and in those 134 we have completed 9 and 12 are in progress, so that comes up to a total of 21, which means there is 1 property of a member that is not registered in the node. Okay, that's what we meant with this information. Next one, we have the statistics here, which is the percentage of the properties that are in the racing track that are owned by node members is 40%. So that's quite good, because we need 20% built. So if we have 40%, that means we are, we need to build half of the properties we own, just as a first step. The percentage of buildings completed in the Circuito da Boavista is 3%. Okay, so we have a lot of work to do, so we need help from you guys. The buildings in progress at the moment are also 3.66, and then there's a percentage of the buildings completed and plus in progress, which is 6.71. The percentage of buildings completed in the total of the node it's 90, and because there is 1 building that we don't have the member in the node. We already contacted him and are waiting for an answer from him. So in total, we've got 95.45%. Okay, so that we are good on that side, but we need to build a lot, and that's fine because we are just on the first month, so plenty time ahead of us, so that in a year time, we hope we have everything done in this racing track, and hopefully before that, so we can jump into the next racing track and the other things we have in our roadmap. Don't forget to consult our roadmap in our Discord server. It's there for us to discuss. There are some facts, fun facts that I'd like to share with you. Before that, I'm just going to go over the floor price at the moment in dollars, $32, the floor price. Okay, after that it jumps to 299. There's not a lot of properties for sale in dollars. The floor price in UPX at the moment is 20,000. So that this is a huge jump since the beginning. 1 month ago, we were on like 8,000 UPX. At the moment, we are going on 20,000. This means there was a lot of people buying properties in the north. So that's quite interesting information. And now I would like to tell you a little bit about the history of this racing track. So the racing track, the races in Porto in general, in Porto, in the city, not in Boavista, they started like over 100 years ago. Okay. After those 100 years, during those 100 years, in the beginning, like 90 years ago, then they started in Boavista, in that area. So we're talking about nearly 100 years of races, really, in Boavista and in the Aldoar Vintage node. Okay, so that's why there's so much to talk about, because the history is huge. There was plenty of racing tracks until we got to this Formula One racing track. Obviously, we wanted to start with a racing track that is internationally known, that everybody knows, that was important, that had Formula One competitions there, with amazing pilots in there, so drivers. So that's why, and I'm sorry that I'm looking at my notes here, but I have to, because it's a lot of information that I've been researching lately. So there was Formula One, there was WTCC, there was WTCR, there were classics, there were Portuguese national competitions in this circuit, and other circuits that were changed a bit just because of the types of cars. They decided to make it in a different way. But this one was the one that had the Formula One. So this one is that kind of the top one, the most important one. But also we were talking about a circuit that was in 1958, 1960. Okay, so many years ago, where there's many funny stories to tell about, and I'm going to tell just two of them today to make you laugh a little bit. Most known drivers, there's plenty of them. The one that catch my eye is Sir Stirling Moss, a British pilot that was a legend. I believe he's still alive, and I'll dedicate a video just to him, because what I've read from him is unique, and a unique pilot with a mentality and a heart of gold, as far as I could understand. There was also a very important situation here in this racing Formula One racing tracks in Boavista, in the Aldoar Vintage node. For the first time ever, a lady was in a Formula One racing. So it's an Italian lady called Maria de Teresa Filippis, and she was driving a Maserati at that time, and she was the first woman to ever have driven a Formula One car in a Formula One racing event. So that's also very interesting to know, and I'll in the future videos I'll dedicate a little bit about that. And I would like to finish with two funny stories about this racing track. So we're talking about 1953. Imagine this pilot called Tony Gaze. He crashed in one of the curves of the racing track, and at that time people were outside their houses watching the races, and people were having drinks, wine, port wine, whatever. And as he had the crash, he got a bit dizzy and he lost conscience a little bit, and people just went there and they didn't have any water with them, but they had port wine. So they just gave him port wine and he came back to life. It's a funny thing, nowadays nobody would think of giving wine when someone is feeling unconscious. But it was what they had in hand, and in Porto, obviously, there was a lot of port wine everywhere, so they just give him the port wine, and he was happy. And the other one is a bit a longer story, but I'm going to cut it short. It was with Duncan Hamilton. He had a very heavy accident, so he lost control of his car. There was another pilot who touched his car, and he lost control of it, and he went straight to a pillar, electricity pillar, and the car was he was projected like 4 meters higher, and he jumped 4 meters down on the floor. Obviously, lost conscience and was taken to the hospital. While he was in the hospital, when he came back to himself, he looked around and everything was very dark. So he asked the nurses and the doctors, "Why is there's no light? It's all very dark." And they told him, "Well, because you hit the electricity post, and that one was the one that is supplying electricity to the hospital. So there's no electricity." So that was a funny one. It keeps going on. He then asks for water, and the nurses told him, "Look, at the moment we can't supply you with water because the water is contaminated. The only thing we have got here is port wine. Would you like a port wine?" He said, "Yes, please." And then he took some red wine. So talking about the hospital, but we are also talking in 1953, so we don't really know what was going on back in that time. But apparently, port wine was in the hospital, and they gave it to him. And then he asks, they start the procedures. We don't know if it was arms, hands, legs, whatever, if he had something broken or not, but doctors had to make a little surgery on him, and they did it without any anesthesia. And then he, of course, it was hurting him so much. He said, "Why don't you give me some anesthesia, because it's hurting quite a lot?" And they told him, "I'm sorry, but the anesthetic took a day off, and because he wanted to go to the races, to see the races." So I think at that time things were a little bit like that. They were kind of the organization, or things were on on a learning curve, probably, and maybe they didn't have access to everything that we had now. We're talking about 53, we're talking about nearly 70 years after, isn't it, where we are living now. So these are some funny facts about the racing track and some of the things that happened there. In the near future, I'm going to start sharing you some little videos of the races, because there are videos and there are photos, lots of them, about this racing track. Very funny ones, and very interesting to see many of the symbols that we know today of some things that we know completely old, and different clothes, the cars, the types of the cars, how they were back then. There's a funny thing that I read where at the beginning of the races in Porto, the speed difference. So the races started. So you can imagine in 1910, in 1910, probably there were many cars, right? So the races started with horses, yeah. And when the first car started, the difference of speed between the horses and the car was none. So imagine the power of the cars was really low. So the horses could run as fast as the first cars that came to the market. So for the races, which is something also funny. And then they were kind of doing the races on the like plain land with grass on it, and it was a kind of funny thing. But I'll leave that for the next videos, and I hope you got excited as much as we are with this racing track. And I would like to leave this video with some sentences. One of them that I found very interesting, from a pilot that is still alive. Actually, he is Portuguese, and he said something about this racing track. As you can see, the racing track has a long kind of straight line, Boavista, then turns left and goes straight, and then you have some curves going up, and then as it comes down, the speed is where you really get a big speed before you get to the finish line. And just before the finish line, you have a very tight, you have a roundabout, and you have a very tight curve on your left. So he was saying that after coming at this speed down the hill, with some curves to the right and to the left, with the car completely unbalanced, and getting to the curve where the finish line was, this was the part of this racing track that really made it worth doing the racing track. And this was the general feeling of the pilots when they were driving there, is that this final part of the racing track down the hill before the finish line was what made it all worth for them as a racing track. So um, quite exciting, and obviously I'm probably more excited than anybody because I've been looking at so many videos and so many photos and so many comments um, and articles about this racing track. So I know there's a lot of that I have to share to you. But yeah, this is the beginning of sharing this information. We need your help. Come to help us to and make part to be part of this racing track. I believe it's going to be a fantastic adventure. We already have some big players in our nod and in the racing track, and yeah, we're just waiting for you to come as well. And yeah, I'll keep sharing these informations, and come to this international racing track. We want, we would really like to have everybody from so many countries. As far as I can understand, also in the history of this racing track, there's a big connection of Portugal, but actually the Porto area with UK, with England in UK, Sterling Moss. I think probably some investors were doing some investments from UK in Portugal, and also a big connection with Italy, obviously because of Enzo Ferrari, which were, you know, at the beginning of the production of his Ferraris, and obviously brought many Ferrari cars. I read that many of the Portuguese pilots were also driving Ferraris from Enzo Ferrari. So I would really love to have, again, these two communities that were connected in history with the Porto region back now in Upland, so we can kind of bring back a little bit of what was that connection. So the connection with from Portuguese with Italy and the Portuguese with UK. Obviously, I'm going to find many, and I already found many pilots from different countries. And in the next videos, I will call out those countries as well to bring. I'm going to make some connections with Italy Upland players and UK based Upland players as well, to bring them back to this racing track, so we can bring a little bit of that history back to the metaverse. It makes sense, and it's the community that makes things happen. So it would be really, really nice to have more English and more Italian people, just like back then in 1952, 58, 50s, in 60s. They were in Porto racing. So I leave you with this. I wish you all well, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.